you all for being here. I'd like to just start off by welcoming any and all questions, comments, concerns, anything you may have at any point. I like to be pretty interactive whenever we're doing these types of things. As Harley mentioned, I'm Ty Duchesneau. I'm a lending analyst for Native Agriculture Financial Services, and I get the privilege of talking to you all today about how to address human risk in agriculture and mitigate it. All right, so kind of just an overview of what we're going to talk about today. There's going to be two main things. It's the human risk factors that exist. Three of them are employee, family, and farm safety. After we talk about those human risk factors, I'm going to give you some mitigation strategies so we can help you build a safer future collectively. Three main types of risk, like I mentioned, are employee, family, and farm safety. In the employee bucket, we're going to have managing employees, physical injuries, and labor shortages. In the family bucket, we're going to have mental health challenges, premises liability, and employment. You may be wondering why we're not talking about wills and that type of thing in the family. That's kind of what I was expecting, but that falls into the legal risk. So we've got a presentation on that as well for you to check out if that's something that interests you. And then lastly is farm safety, where we're going to talk about food safety, health hazards, and agritourism. So employee risk. The first thing is managing employees. It is very, very, very important to know your federal, state, local, and tribal law if applicable. The state law may differ from federal law. That was one thing that was surprising to me. And then local and tribal law can differ from your state law. So just know that you're in compliance of your labor laws, as non-compliance is typically not a good thing. You need to know your minimum wage, the overtime requirements, what you're expected there, and then what are the suitable working hours, the amount of hours you can have folks work in a week, that type of thing. Not following worker safety regulations will lead to fines. You're going to get violations, and then in turn will turn into the fine component. Employee misclassification is also a big one. This is one that I wasn't super familiar with, but it can result in legal penalties and also having to back pay the employee. And perhaps one of the newer ones on the list is the privacy and data protection. Breaches will result in violation of privacy law anytime your employee or your client or customer or anything is giving you their access to their private information. You need to be sure that it is secure and you treat it as such. Retaliation claims. This is a big one. Just because an employee files a complaint against you or your company, you don't have the right to retaliate back and do whatever you'd like back to them. That's a common occurrence, but it will get you in trouble. Then we have physical injuries. As many of you are probably all aware, agriculture is a very dangerous sector. It's actually the most dangerous work sector in America. Roughly 50%, a little bit over, of the mortalities that occur in the agriculture industry are on individuals aged 15 to 24. That was really shocking to me, but as I think to some of the tragic events that have taken place in our communities, it does seem to usually be those younger folks who are kind of at the brunt of those injuries, most commonly caused by machinery and vehicles. Some common physical injuries can be machinery accidents, animal injuries. It could be you're working cows and one runs you over in the alleyway, that type of thing. And then heat exposure. It's a common misconception that if you're not young and you're not old, heat exposure doesn't affect you. But I've got news for you. The heat doesn't care about your age. Make sure you're taking care of yourself. That's important. And then disability as well. So how does this apply to family? Immediate family, most oftentimes your operations insurance policy is probably going to have them covered. But say you've got Uncle Ed's cousin coming over, that policy might actually not cover that extended family. So it's worth looking into just to ensure that every time you have someone on your operation, you're insured and everything's going to go smoothly. Labor shortages. So the USDA found that 88% of small farms, which is considered less than $350,000 in gross income, have a need and pursue off-farm income to support their on-farm operation. The BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, additionally found that we are expecting to see a 2% decline in the workforce over the next decade. So that's about 16,000 jobs. And I want to say the BLS's most recent reports have a little bit higher expected decline, just with the political environment we're in currently. So how may we see it? You're going to have more difficult time in recruiting folks to come work for you, but then also a tougher time to retain those folks. This is just going to be partially due to supply and demand. And I mean, as folks are able to get higher paying options because the demand is higher, they're going to be quicker to move on from where they're working. And then likewise, you're going to expect to see farm operations and productivity decrease. That being said, that is barring no technological advancements. So you could see some technological advancements that allow you to increase your operations productivity with less human input. I'm not saying that's not going to happen. We're seeing that happen. But a lot of these smaller farms that we're discussing might not have access to the capital required to get that higher productivity equipment. Moving on to family risk. Mental health challenges. This is kind of a tough one that not a lot of people like to talk about, but it's definitely something that needs to be talked about. Indigenous people have some of the highest rates of mental illness as a percentage in our country, and it is estimated that up to 70% of this population will suffer some sort of mental health disorder at some point in their life. And a lot of that can just be attributed to stress factors. One of the most common ones, any business owner is going to understand this, is the financial pressures that come along with owning a business. You've got to know the ins and outs, the ebbs and flows, the market cycle, all of your books, that type of thing. And sometimes that can get to be pretty tough whenever things aren't maybe looking as good as you'd hoped they'd been. Another big one is family issues, divorce, death, the D's. Those are kind of some things that can cause a lot of these mental health challenges that face our producers. And then it's the unpredictability of farming. I don't know what the weather is going to be like 7 months from now. And I don't know what the market's going to look like next year when I'm trying to sell my crop, or I don't know if the cattle market's gonna sustain. It's unpredictable, and we've got to understand that it's going to be ups and downs, and usually quite drastic. So we've got to plan for that. How can you notice these mental health struggles? It's most often seen through a decrease in productivity. So if you've got an individual who's working for you or on your operation that was usually up at 6 in the morning, constantly getting chores done right away, and they're maybe kind of just straggling along, and it's getting to be closer to 8 or 9 before they get out the door, it might not hurt just to check in, see how they're doing mentally, and see if there's anything you can do to help them. Accompanying that will be a diminishing quality of life, and then ultimately a loss of interest if it gets severe enough. You'll notice a lot of folks, they start to lose vision of their long-term planning. So their 10, 15-year plans, they don't really have as much of a dialed in idea on what they want to do, where they want to go from there, and they can ultimately lose interest even down to the daily operation of things. So we're going to be sharing this presentation with you. It'll be on our websites and stuff, as Harley stated. I added 3 resources, 2 by the Farmer Veteran Coalition on mental health awareness and mental health training programs, and then also one by the Farm Bureau. They have a State of Mind campaign, which is helping farmers and ranchers get access to these mental health resources. Premises liability. Premises liability is a legal principle that holds property owners responsible for injuries that occur on their property when caused by their negligence. So there's some risks. So you got to realize that when you have folks over for a farm visit or anything of that nature, or even having some neighbors over to help branding, you're liable for any injuries that are experienced by visitors, employees, or even contractors. This could be something as simple as having uneven ground, roll, and broken ankle. You're liable for that because you should have walked through and seen that there was uneven ground there. So just make sure you've got premises liability to help keep you secure in this type of thing. Animal related injuries, that's a really common one around here. Improperly secured or malfunctioning equipment, collapsing of structures, open pits or ditches, and then obviously natural hazards. So this could be bodies of water, falling branches, stepping in prairie dog hole, that type of thing. Those are where premises liability is coming in. You're liable for anything that occurs on your operation and on your land. Employing others. So this is kind of going back to our other one. It's pretty similar. You got to know your federal, state, local, and tribal law. I cannot stress that enough. Oftentimes folks think, oh, I'm following federal law, like I'm good. No, your state law is probably going to be different. Your local and tribal law could even be differ from those. So OSHA is a big one, Occupational Safety and Health Act. This just essentially assures safe and healthful working conditions for everybody on the operation. There's also the Equal Employment Opportunity Laws. This states you can't discriminate based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. And state labor laws, minimum wage. You'll notice there's a big variance across our different states and what the minimum wage is. Worker safety's got some variance as well. And worth noting, it likely differs from federal law. Workers' compensation laws, it provides financial support to employees victim to work-related injuries or illnesses. And it is a requirement to carry workers' compensation insurance. So if you are employing folks and you don't have it and you live outside of Texas, you need to look into it. Failure to comply to any of these will likely result in legal action. So farm safety. First, we're going to start with food safety. There's different routes of contamination, direct and cross contamination. Direct is feces, illness, injury, that type of thing. Cross contamination can be from your clothing, your hands, shoes, tools, to even your equipment. The shovel you were getting potatoes out of the ground with had some manure on it or something like that. So contaminated produce can result in foodborne illness. It's also widely accepted that you must have no detectable generic E. coli in 100 milliliters of water whenever you're using post-harvest to clean up your crop, clean up your water. Your water needs to be clean. Um, then an inability to trace the source of contamination. So this allows for potentially contaminated products to spread. You need to know where your contamination is coming from. You need to have a plan to track that down and then to spread that to whoever it needs to go to let them know, hey, this product is contaminated. I know the cause, and these are the other products that are likely or could be contaminated. This goes hand in hand with the corrective actions and record keeping. You need to have hard data to take to anybody, especially your lenders. If you're coming to me wanting a loan to do your potato selling company, I'm going to want to know that you have a plan in place for if something like this happens. And then provide appropriate health and hygiene practices. OSHA requires one restroom facility per 20 workers within a quarter mile from the working area. This is just one example of the kind of super specific law that is out there that I wasn't aware of. That being said, there are plenty more. So if you haven't looked into them, it's definitely worthwhile. Health hazards. A really common one around this time is exposure to pesticides and chemicals. So you need to know the products you're working with. They're oftentimes a lot more potent than you expect, and you may know of. Also, a risk of zoonotic diseases. So this can be brucellosis, Campylobacter, E. coli, so on and so forth. Right now, we're really seeing it in the avian flu, and a lot of these health hazards can and will lead to long-term health impacts. Some of them just from normal wear and tear, is arthritis, hearing loss from being around loud machinery. But there's been some cancers that it's been linked to being more prevalent in farmers, and that's myeloma, melanoma, and prostate cancer. Agritourism. This one is very encompassing. It has essentially all of the risks that we've talked about thrown into one. So if you're ever having some agritourism on your operation, it is vital that you know what you're doing and you've looked into all these different things. Visitor safety, as we've stated, you're liable for any injury sustained by visitors due to the lack of maintenance. So it could be a slip, trip, fall, doesn't matter. You're likely liable. Animal interactions. You're to blame for injuries caused by animal interactions. So you might have, a good old trusty steed outside horse. You're going to have some neighbor kids come pet. If it bites them, if it kicks them, anything happens to them, you're liable for that. You would assume that, yeah, they took the risk, they're doing it, but you're definitely in the position to be liable there. Food safety. You're, like I said, you're responsible for foodborne illnesses caused by negligence. It's your responsibility to ensure that the food you're serving, the food you're providing to your guests, is prepared in a way that is safe. And then emergency preparedness. You're at fault for inadequate response to medical emergencies, fires, or other urgent situations. So you might want to think about getting an AED on your premises if that's something where you're going to be having constant visitors, because that's something that you should be doing already. there's violations and financial liability that follows in a lot of these if you're found to be falling under the radar. So before we discuss how we can mitigate some of this risk, is there any questions, comments, or clarification on what exactly um, what we've talked about thus far? If there is, just feel free to throw them in the chat and we can go from there. Yes, Timothy.
Hey, how you doing?
Doing good. How about yourself?
Hey, I live the dream in Texas. Thank you very much. So when you mentioned several things, and one of the number one things that stood out to me is the tribal laws. And out in Texas, I'm surrounded by Oklahoma, New Mexico, and Louisiana. So when we talk about the tribal laws, are we talking about the true tribal laws that Black American and Native American are mixed that make up the tribal laws? Or are we talking about Native American reservation tribal laws?
Yeah, yeah,
'Cause I'm kind of confused with that because we Black America, Native American, Trail of Tears are the same. So that's what I'm trying to understand. Because Native Americans like to say we're not tribal when we are. So I really would like that cleared up. If this
yeah.
not the forum for it, I understand. And thank you
No,
for
absolutely.
acknowledging me.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for bringing that to point. So what I was talking about there is, like for instance, my operation is on the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe. So there's nothing saying that the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe doesn't have their own worker safety laws that may be in place. And being that we're within the tribal boundaries, I would have to abide by those laws. We can discuss more a little bit after if that's helpful for you. Your hand's still raised, Timothy. Do you have more to add?
Yes. Cause,
Okay.
'cause that okay. I understand the tribal laws of the United States and I understand that. But when you mention tribal laws, we talk about farming, agriculture, all of those things. Is Black America still considered under tribal law? Because I listen, I totally understand. So that's all I'm asking. Are we can still? Because when you mention Native American, that's tribal law. That means they have their own reservations, things like that. So are we still able to produce foods and things for the nation under this law? Or that's only reserved for those uh, Native Americans on a certain uh, government permitted land.
Yeah. So
I don't understand. I'm confused, bro. I think
okay.
I'm very confused on that law.
Okay, so the tribal law is pertaining to just the area that has jurisdiction. So I'm not entirely sure how to properly answer your question. What I'm meaning there by tribal law is I am within Cheyenne River's tribal boundaries, so that would be their discretion. I have to follow their law. I'm not entirely sure how that would translate. I'm assuming similar to following state and federal law. We can discuss a little bit further after, and then I've got some colleagues that I could bring into the conversation who'd probably have a little bit better answer for you there as far as the legal components go. Thank you for bringing that up. All right, so moving on, how do we mitigate these types of risks? So how can we mitigate our employee risk? First things first is managing your employees, know the law in place, and ensure you're complying with the law. This is pretty straightforward. Anybody who is employing folks should be doing this. Physical injuries, you'll see a lot of operations have started implementing safety training programs. They've been showing how to properly use protective equipment and regularly maintaining machinery. This is a really common one when machine accidents occur. It's just the machinery may or may not have been regularly maintained. It could cause things to go wrong. And then labor shortages. So obviously offer competitive wages if you're trying to get that advantage. Have a little bit less risk of needing that constant recruitment retention battle. You can provide benefits, incentives to committed, reliable employees, and just let them know that you're appreciating all that they're doing for you. They are helping your operation stay afloat, and they play a very vital role right on the ground floor, doing most of the work. Not most of the work, but doing the work to help. And then introductory training programs. This is a big one. You can't expect to hire someone to come on for the summer months to bale hay if you didn't show them how to bale hay, you know? So it's just show them what to do. Chances are if they're seeking your employment, they want to do it the right way. Yeah, and then if you can think of any other mitigation strategies throughout, just feel free to throw them in the chat. There's definitely some that I'm missing. So family risk mitigation. Um, how can we mitigate the risk of mental health challenges? You can definitely utilize the mental health resources that I shared. There's hotlines, counselors, so on and so forth. But most importantly, you just got to talk about it. It's one of those things that society has kind of pushed into a hush hush area, but we need to talk about it. It's one of the most important things of our operation is our mentals. So we got to keep them in a good work life balance, and it can't be all work. You got to have some enjoyment as well. And then premises liability, liability insurance, liability insurance, liability insurance. This is huge. You need to have it. And then, like I stated, having some of your emergency preparedness strategies. There's a lot of opportunities out there where folks can kind of get help with developing these types of strategies, sometimes free of cost. And then employment, comply with your existing comply with your existing laws. State laws are likely going to differ from federal. I know I keep saying that, but it is really important to know. And then workers' comp insurance. You should have that. Even if you are in Texas, I would recommend it, but it's not required there. Gregory asked if you recognize a mental health issue, would you recommend removing that person from work or activities on the farm? That's a good question. I think you need to tread lightly. Disrupting what is their routine might not help. Being transparent and just saying, "Hey, John, like I was just checking in. You kind of seemed like you maybe weren't feeling the best or things weren't going good. Let's just chat a little bit. How you been going? What are you noticing out there in the pastures that I'm not seeing? Is there anything that I need to be doing? But more importantly, how are you doing?" I don't know if removing them from the work would be uh, the first step, but if they are seeking and interested in having a little time off, definitely be understanding of that and help get them pointed to the direction and to get the help they need. All right, farm safety risk mitigation. So food safety, you need to implement good agricultural practices, which ensures proper sanitation and hygiene in every facet. I'll get to your question one second, William. You need to have clean and sanitized equipment during harvesting and processing. That's where a lot of those cross contamination instances can occur. And then you need to obviously mitigate your opportunities for contamination. That one's kind of an obvious one, but you'd be surprised how often folks maybe have a manure pile sitting right next to their tractor, and that manure is blowing all over their bucket, the bucket of their tractor. And then health hazards. Provide PPE, proper protective equipment, proper training, vaccinate your livestock, and ensure that they have clean water sources. And agritourism, anytime you're going to have people walking through, you need to do a pre-farm walkthrough. So document any hazards you have before. So if I know that I'm going to be going out to my south pasture to go look through the cows, I'm maybe going to drive out there beforehand and find a good spot where I'm going to take everybody. I'm going to walk around the area, just make sure there's nothing that could cause danger. And then if there is, make sure you address those and ensure that you're supervising all activities that are taking place on your premises and be knowledgeable of your emergency plan and just have it ready in case you need to utilize it. William asked, if you institute safety training or other programs, attention must be paid to the frequency and compliance with refresher training. Yep, that's a good point. Oop. Lastly, Um, there is a risk of working with family. This is a little bit different than family risk. It is directly working with family. It doesn't have to be an inherent risk. And I'm not saying don't do it at all because I do it. I work with my family every day here on our operation. The USDA's NAS data shows that 96% of farms are family owned. So, what are some common conflicts that can kind of cause a little bit of rifts in working with family? Decision making is a big one. Um, who's to say that I don't get to be the one to say where we're going to put our cows this week, or what's going to happen there, or what we're going to plant? Financial disagreements. Maybe I don't think we need a new grain bin. I think we might need to get a new header for our combine, that type of thing. Um, where we're going to use the off farm income or using of farm income. So if I'm working off farm and I'm still a stakeholder in the operation, but I'm contributing my off farm income to the operation, I maybe am going to want to say where that money is directly going, but I might not be the largest stakeholder. So these are all things that um, you need to have knowledge of in order to mitigate the risk, which we'll get into how we can mitigate some of these. And succession planning, that is a big one. Nobody likes to talk about death or transition, that type of thing, but it's important. If something happens to you tomorrow, what's going to happen with the place? You need to have a plan. But the main thing that I've seen is conflicts often arise due to the lack of communication. A lot of these common conflicts can be completely avoided with simple conversation, openness. Business partners need to discuss the business. That's just plain and simple. Any stakeholder in the operation needs to have a say in what's going on, and they need to be knowledgeable about what's going on. And the best way you can do that is through clear lines of communication. How can we mitigate risk when working with family? Clear communication, clear communication. That's so important. You need to also have definitive roles of each individual. So if I've got three brothers working together, one brother, all right, you're working with the cattle. That's kind of your role. That's what you like. The other one, you can do the planting, that sort of thing. Just have roles lined out. And so there's not any kind of overreach, so to speak, on, well, this is in my bucket, so I'm going to take care of it. As well as regular family meetings. These can be family or farm meetings. These are important just to kind of get the bearings on what's all going on. What are we doing this week? What do we need to be looking forward to? That type of thing. And then a payment schedule for employees. Any employees you have, this is really good. You need to establish something like this, make it a consistent schedule, not just, as you need groceries, just pull it out of the account. That works. I wouldn't recommend that just because there's a lot of issue for that to come up and cause issues. And well, you got more than I did, that type of thing. Let's just develop a payment schedule. And then we're not going to be overspending our farm income. And then you also need to just be transparent and understand that as business partners, there may be times where you're going to disagree. You're going to have a little bit of conflict. So, how can we develop some resolution to this? We don't want to have this conflict among business partners. So, what are our strategies to mitigate it? How can we go about addressing that conflict whenever it does occur? Do we need a mediator, or is it one of those things where we just need to talk through our thoughts? Succession planning, it's always good to maybe get some professional advice when it comes to this, just to be certain everything's the way that it should be. And then discuss the family operation as if it is a business, because it is. I get it's more probably most folks' livelihood and it's just their normal. But every day you're a business owner. You take pride in what you produce, and that's part of you running it like an operation. It's a business. So Timothy asked, he's got a goat farm and he's got an individual who is injured in a moonlight job and he wants me to pay for eye care and he's looking for some advice there. Uh, Timothy, let's talk a little bit after this and we can kind of get into the details on that one. And we'll go from there. So with that, that is my presentation on addressing human risk and some of the risk mitigation strategies. If you have any questions, comments, feel free to throw them out. I'm happy to stay here as long as you'd all like. That being said, I'm gonna have a recording of this and it'll be posted, and I'm sure we'll share the link with you.
Yes, for sure. I'm going through and I'm allowing everybody to talk so that if anybody has any questions, you'll have the ability to just raise your hand and have an open discussion. As soon as I have everybody allowed to talk, I will stop the recording so that you guys can have that open discussion. And thank you guys so much for joining us today. I will be sending out a link to the recording along with the presentation slides, more than likely by the end of tomorrow. So just know that we really appreciate you guys being here. At this point, I am stopping the recording.